press record. Can everybody see the screen now? I'm hoping
Yes.
they can. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. If you just like to mute yourself, then that would be good. Okay, so a warm welcome to the Influencer Marketing Roundtable for those of you that are watching this on record. A little bit of background on myself for those of you that don't know who I am. I am a podcast host, Influence Global Podcast now, and it's fourth season actually. We've interviewed all sorts of influencers, agencies, brands, platforms from all around the world, and you can hear that on Spotify or any of the other platforms. I was fortunate enough to write a book on influencer marketing strategy. Some of you, of course, have been included in that as well. And that was published in March this year, and it's a real deep dive into the whole industry. But I also speak at events. I'm a panel host. I'm also the founder of the Branded Content Marketing Association Influence Division. And you can also work with me on a one-to-one basis. And briefly, what this is my influencer marketing program, which is really geared at trying to help businesses and individuals become more influential. Ultimately, we all want to generate more revenue, charge higher prices, have customers coming to them, and also have content consumed by a wider audience. And I do that through a 5-step process that you can see there on the right hand side. If anybody's interested in setting up a call with me to discuss this in more detail, then I'm happy to do so. So today's session I really wanted to share with you is all about what influencers want and what they don't want. And we did, when I was at the Branded Content Marketing Association in 2019, we commissioned a piece of research from influencer marketing platform Whalar, and we asked the 250 content creators what they really wanted, what they liked and what they didn't want. So I'm sharing some of the findings from that. But I think before we do that, I think it's important to remember what some of these individuals can get for you. This is as much for the people that aren't in the influencer space. Trust being one thing. Particularly, I was looking at some research recently. I think it was Gartner that actually said millennials and Gen Z trust traditional advertising to the tune of just 1%, which is horrifyingly low. They're more likely to trust the opinions of friends, family, and their favorite YouTubers more than anybody else. So influencers can create real brand trust for you. They also have a huge amount of expertise in their niche, and that's highly valuable for a brand. Obviously, in many instances, you're engaging and buying into a follower base. Although it's very important to realise that it's engagement that matters more than anything else. They also have a considerable share of voice. In fact, I was interviewing somebody on a podcast just recently, a big global whiskey brand that actually, and because they used a number of influencers all around the world, they were able to penetrate new markets largely because this one or two of these influencers had a very big share of a specific niche, and it worked very, very successfully. They're great storytellers, and they can often tell your story in a way that perhaps as a brand you'd not thought about doing. Particularly when it comes to blogs and YouTube videos, that content can continually keep giving. In fact, I was looking at the don't know if any of you remember the Charlie Bit My Finger video that was hugely successful back. That's 13 years that video now, and it's got something like 879 million views. In fact, they did a repeat of it when the boys were much older, and that still got 6 million views. So, in terms of ad content, that's highly valuable. It can also be a cost-effective advertising because lots of new startup brands. If you think about it, a restaurant opening or a new clothing brand are really embracing influencer marketing because they see a real return on that investment. Although it's also fair to say that you shouldn't expect that in the same way that you wouldn't necessarily go out and rush and buy something on TV just because you've seen something once. So it is also to be measured about the returns that you're likely to get if it's done, just in isolation. In fact, some of the big growths in influencer marketing is when paid advertising is supported by it. Obviously, as well, it's about relevance, making sure that you find the right influencers that are totally in tune and relevant to your brand message. So this is some of the research that we found from this survey that I was alluding to a few minutes ago. What influencers want is they want to be treated with respect and communicate in a professional manner. I mean, let's remember they are human beings. Often, some of them many of them working alone. Some of the bigger ones have got teams behind them, and of course, they've also got management if they're bigger. But there's a huge percentage of them, particularly the micro and nano influencers, that have almost become successful overnight and don't necessarily know how to manage all of their business interests. So, be mindful of this. They want to be briefed well. Because like anybody, there's nothing worse than a campaign. If a campaign doesn't work, it doesn't work for the brand. It doesn't work for the influencer either. So everybody loses, and the devil is in the detail. So making sure that the briefs are well executed, and also they want to be paid on time. Ideally within a very short period after the campaign, or in some instances before. Be interested to get your views upon that. But I have had some dreadful instances of influencers not being paid for sort of 90 days. Now, major corporates may decide to do that, but when these individuals are working on their own, that's not acceptable. What they like and want is their content to be respected and enjoyed. One of the things that I've noticed is that sometimes brands are so prescriptive about what they want when they communicate with an influencer. And remember, the most important thing for an influencer is their audience, and making sure that the tone of voice is synonymous with what that influencer has been used to conveying. So, I know that there have been instances where influencers have said, "I'm sorry, I can't really say that. That wouldn't be the way I would communicate that brand message." They also want to be given enough time to create content and involved in the campaign discussion earlier. They're not just amplifiers and media buys, they're also talented content creators. In fact, often I refer them to as creative agencies in many instances. So, involve them in the process as early as you possibly can. In many instances, influencers will have contracts, so make sure that you've given them enough brand guidelines and details about the company. If you think about it, if you were hiring a salesperson, you wouldn't just expect them to go off half-cocked, would you? You'd make sure that they've got enough information about what the product is all about, and even the way that something is sounds. If you're going to ask somebody to promote Nike, is it Nike or is it Nike? If somebody's going to create a video and has got the sound intonation wrong of your brand, well, that's a whole load of work that could have been avoided if it was briefed properly. They also want one point of contact in a company. Nothing frustrates them more when they've got an account manager, they've got a finance person, they've got somebody in their content team. And bearing in mind, a lot of these bigger influencers have got multiple campaigns going on at one time. They want obviously to make sure that there's flexibility on the brand message, and their tone of voice is super important as well. Not to be asked to do everything for free, and this is a real frustration. In fact, I wrote about this in the book. A free dress doesn't pay the rent. And whilst we know that in the early parts of influencer marketing, particularly amongst nano influencers, it's often a way to get on the ladder. It can be, these people are still trying to, pay the rent, run a business, and manage all of those things. So what I think they get frustrated about is when certain things have been agreed, and then, oh well, will you do this and will you do that? Well, those things need to be agreed in advance. Also, making sure that for licensing as well, one shouldn't assume that just because you've engaged with an influencer, you can use all of their content on your social media or on your other forms of marketing collateral without expressed agreement to do so. Now, also, we actually found out that the three things that they really wanted help and support was marketing, financial advice, and opportunities to network. So these were really important issues, of which things like the Branded Content Marketing Association has helped and support people with. But making sure that we've got proper legal contracts in place is very, very important for influence as well as brand, and particularly when it comes to brand safety. What you don't want to do is make sure that you're engaging with an influencer, for example, that has blasphemed before or has said something controversial or has. You really need to do some deep dive research before you engage with them. And I know we've got some influencer platforms here which have, phenomenal amounts of data which will enable you to do that really, really well. They also like the opportunity to network and meet brands and other influencers. There's lots of events now. Hopefully we're starting to see a return of in-person events, and these are great ways for you guys to meet influencers, but also for them to meet each other. I'm also a believer that when you're working with an influencer really, really well, they know other good influencers. So it's great to build up your own personal connection of these people. They also want more ways to monetize content and drive additional revenue streams. So sometimes affiliate marketing is very successful nowadays. Lots of them have become publishers. We've seen a growth in influencers developing their own brands as well as anything else, and that's been very, very popular. And I think we're going to see more of that. The last thing I wanted to share with you was who influencers look up to. And Tezza came up at the top of the list. And I think it's really quite fascinating to see why she did, because what they've said here, she's built a strong brand, it's clear identity, she has a loyal following, fantastic partnerships, very relatable, no ego. I love all this because these are the really important attributes of why people want to work with influencers as well. Consistency, quality content, and really, really understanding and knowing their numbers. So anyway, that's a little bit of an overview. I thought you might find that interesting, and let's have a broader discussion around that. I'm going to stop the sharing now. Hopefully that was of interest. Jeanette, perhaps you want to just what's been your experiences of what influencers want and don't want?
I think it depends on the knowledge of the influencer themselves. I see some that are really thinking like marketers themselves because they run a business, so they've adopted it. They also want to have collaborations that make both sides happy. So they, sometimes you have the feeling that there are two different languages spoken. And then there are some that they're just spoiled brats. So,
Yeah. There's certainly a little bit of that for sure. Yeah. No, thank you, Jeanette. Tony, I know you've got to shoot off in a couple of minutes. I was just quite keen to get a little perspective from you, particularly when you're looking at what's your sort of experience around what influencers want and don't want.
It's a really difficult question, really. When it comes to what they want, is definitely good briefing, but I think it's a bit more than that. It's selecting the right influencers at first, aligning it to the product or service of the brand, and looking at their followers. So once you've got the data behind them, it's easier to actually collaborate with influencers. And it actually, rather than saying what they want specifically, apart from money and great brands and building up a portfolio of like a CV, I think it's enriching them to actually stand out better and resonate with their followers, with authentic brands, which they actually love. Which is where we're going. That's what our company is all about, is taking that data-driven decision making and backing them up. Because when we're negotiating with influencers, some of them, like the fine lady said, like they are idiots, and some are very professional, but we negotiate based on their followers, their content. So I think a lot of them don't make it as a full-time job, and rewarding them with gifts or money, it just becomes, there's no single answer for that, what they want. It really depends on how we target the best influencers for the brand. If that answers the question, I could go on and on and on.
No, I think
But
you're right. I think you're right. It's almost like it's a big triangle, isn't it? I mean, the people that are
yeah,
really making it and are absolutely delivering on point are right at the top of that triangle. But there's a
yeah,
whole load of people that are at the bottom end that really
yeah,
want to be an influencer, but really don't know how to navigate through that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's about, how do I still think there's a massive educational
yeah,
requirement right the way
exactly.
through the channel, which is sort of you and I
Yeah.
agree with anyway.
And just my last point, I think one of their flaws is get rich quick. It's let me, quickly get my followers up rather than focusing on their content and really adding value to their followers. Because some people can rapidly increase their follower base based on high quality content, where some just do it for money, and that's the gap, and then
Yeah.
they end up doing jobs. So
Well, then, because what you don't want is somebody promoting one product 1 minute and then another product the next, and then another product. It
yeah,
almost becomes a
e-
market stall approach, and you think, well,
exactly.
well, how
Yeah,
can that person be
yeah,
true to that brand?
yeah,
Whereas if we can create almost, ambassador relationships
exactly.
like we've seen with some of the Gym Sharks of this world and the
Yeah,
Booloos, which have almost created entire influencer programs as part of their brand strategy, it's a completely different
yeah.
story, isn't it? Okay,
Well,
buddy.
thank you, and
Thank you.
lovely to meet you all. And I do apologize, I need to dash off, but I hope to see you next time
Yeah,
for a
thanks.
longer session.
Thanks,
All right.
Tony. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Okay,
All the
cheers.
Thank
best.
you.
Thank
Um,
you.
Stephen, yeah, what's your question or comment?
Yeah, actually, it's more a comment than a question. I really wanted to just amplify one word that came into that last. I'm sorry, I didn't get his name.
Tony Lasker, yeah.
Tony, what Tony said, and that was authenticity. And I think it sort of, he just slipped it in there, and I think that's so important with influencers, that they're authentic, and it covers everything else that he spoke about afterwards. Sticking to one brand, you mentioned, like, you get someone maybe having one brand and then having their competitor the next week and trying to influence people. And I think what we're seeing is that influencers are when they started out, they were talking about what they liked, they built a following, they put content, and it was all about that. Now they're marketeers. We know that. I think anyone's being very foolish if they listen to an influencer and truly believe these top influencers are just talking about what they like. But we know that the companies are paying them. We know they're getting, they're being paid like the old marketing companies were. So we have to accept that they are marketeers, and therefore the really authentic ones who stick to a brand awareness, as you say, build a following around what they're talking about, and really are influencing rather than marketing. That, for me, that is going to shine through over the years to come, and we're going to really see, I think, a divide. And this will be where we'll see these ones falling by the wayside who are just doing it for the money, and the really authentic ones who are really behind the products and trying to market in a better way, trying to give things rather than just pushing a brand, really giving you a reason why they like that brand and
Yeah.
what's good about the product and why it might suit you or their market and their followers.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Stephen. And I think the ideal scenario is when somebody would have bought something, an influencer would have bought something in their own right. And that's what they want. They want to work with brands that they really enjoy, like, and they can bring to their audiences. They can add value to that. And I think this is the problem with so many brands that get it wrong. I mean, 65 to 70% of influencers ignore outbound emails. It may even be higher than that in certain instances, and the reason they do that is because the brand is just thinking, oh well, if I send this outreach, they're going to want to work with this if I give them a free product. Well, not necessarily the case, because if it doesn't match their own brand values, then it's not going to work. So no, thank you for that, Stephen. James had his hand up there.
I did, but then I lowered it. But I just wanted to extend what others have said, really. I mean, authenticity is a word that we've been using in this game for years. However, brands haven't always put it into practice. I think we've got to be very mindful not to overgeneralize on the creator economy. I think Tony said he's got 100 influencers on his books. Well, we can't generalize what 100 million profiles are. We can't type 100 million people. At Indahash, we work with 4 or 5 million. We're in that same challenging boat. Now, hold on, you can't start marking people's cards as a general rule. What does frustrate me, and I'm seeing it time and time again, even though as an industry we have discussed this for years, is that some of the influencers who are billboards, who are pretty much doing an ad after an ad after an ad, they are still getting brands embracing them when all they seem to be doing is ads. And these aren't random brands, but these are some of the world's largest brands who have got technologies in place, who've got detection. One of the things that really is a bugbear, and again, it's a shame Tony's not here because I know he will understand this, is the importance of data, influencer audience data, credibility of the audiences. Now, of course, I'm not here to do a sales pitch on Indahash, but a lot of businesses, Indahash included, have got technology in place to determine the credibility of an audience. And to know where their audience location is. And there's one particular influencer who's only got a 10% UK audience, and he does brand after brand after brand in the UK, when the majority of his audience is in India and Brazil. And I'm stunned that he still gets these partnerships. But this is really going back to what brands should want, and that wasn't the question here. We went quite quickly into what we think brands should be going for, rather than what influencers want. But then I go back to my point about being mindful. We cannot group a community of 100 million people globally under the same bracket. No. Yes, there are knobhead influencers, but then you'll learn not to work with them. They don't deliver content on time. They're too expensive. They are lazy with their approach. And then you learn over time, this type of person is not going to work for my brand. That's really what I wanted to say.
No, it's a really good point, James. And I think this is why the data tools that are available to the industry should be used. And if I say this countless times, is if you're not sure about influencer marketing, then by all means work with a consultant, somebody that can do this, because otherwise, if it falls flat on its face and the campaign doesn't deliver the results, then who loses out? The brand loses out as much as anything else. But I do share your concern about that, James. It's really frustrating when there are some amazing tools out there that will talk about audience quality, geolocation, the gender split. I mean, just because somebody's got 500,000 followers, if 80% of the followers are male, and this is a female targeted brand, you'd be thinking, what on earth are you doing? You are wasting so much of your money in not using the campaign appropriately. Meg, really interested to hear from you, because you're living and breathing working with influencers. What's your sort of take on this sort of subject?
I think everyone's kind of summarized it, that what influencers want is very much a case-by-case basis. I think one of the problems that a lot of people trying to do influencer marketing have is they think that one method fits everything. Absolutely. And it doesn't. You can never, for the brands as well and for the influencers, you're never going to have on a campaign everybody doing the same thing. And if you are, there's something that's probably going to go wrong there. But I think there was an interesting point that you raised in your presentation where you said that they kind of wanted to be treated as people, because one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is our relationships with our influencers. And I think if you do get a really good build a really good relationship with an influencer or a management agency, that's kind of when you can kind of lean on each other. So I know that sometimes we've got agencies that we work with, and we know that we've got a brand that comes to us, and we'll just go to the agency and say, look, we know kind of, we've worked with you before, we've got a good relationship, like we've got this brand deal, have you got anyone that would be interested? And then they can put the best people forward, and the people that they're putting forward genuinely do have an interest in the product, which means that the campaign is going to be better, because nobody wants to be buying something that you can tell is just an ad. I think influencer marketing, kind of when it first started, it was really great and everything did seem very authentic, and then we've kind of now shifted into this space where everyone wants to do it, which is great, but because everyone wants to do it, it means that a lot of the influencers that you're regularly seeing are sometimes shifting into that ad after ad after ad, which kind of is where you do lose the authenticity of it. But yeah, I think it is case by case. It's kind of, you kind of have to take it as it comes, instead of just thinking it's all going to work straight away.
Also, yeah, I guess as well, Meg, you're dealing with people at the end of the day, and they're going to have different moods, they're going to have different moments. You know, there are going to be challenges in their personal lives. But I mean, there's some data around the industry that talks about 11 times greater ROI than any form of advertising media, which is quite phenomenal. But I will often say, caveat that, but say when done well. In other words, when they're briefed well, when they understand what's expected of them, when, you know, the brand, because I think sometimes the people that are not used to working in the influencer space, you know, that they're missing loops, aren't they? They're missing things, and they think, oh well, I'm just going to try and reach out to people on Instagram, and I'm just going to try and find some people, and of course then they make some mistakes. It doesn't really give them the traction, or they've invested so much energy into just doing influencer marketing in isolation and not thinking it's part of a wider marketing campaign. And then, of course, they've got to sell that internally, because you might have a really active marketing manager that loves the idea of this, and yet you've got a suspicious financial or main board that thinks it's a load of tosh and it's not really going to give them the results they need. So that's good to hear from you. Thank you, Meg. Charles, you've got a point to make.
More of a question. So I'm sort of new to this whole influencing element, and I'm starting a new company. And essentially, our customer base are very focused. There's probably 10,000 people that we need to influence. And if we secure one contract, that might be worth anywhere between 50 and 100,000 pounds. So it's B2B. This isn't mass marketing. It's not mass product. But any one of those who convert is a lot of money for us. So what's different about really focused marketing, or sorry, influencing B2B, and what's best practice in that sphere?
Well, it's an interesting point, because B2B influencer marketing is one of the areas that has grown hugely in the last few years, because I didn't show this slide this morning, but there's a great slide I often use in a presentation which talks about the different types of influencers. We've been talking a little bit maybe about the social media influencers, but authors, speakers, technical experts, business leaders, these can all be influencers. You know, anybody that has the ability to change the behavior of others through trusted opinion, content creation, or knowledge is, in my book, an influencer. So, I mean, one of the things that I did last year, and it'd be interesting to see, probably Sahil has done something similar as well, is what we call co-collaboration research. In fact, I've got one of it here. Here you go. So look, I don't know if you can see this. Can you see that, Charles? So what I did was I worked with influencer platform Analytica, and what we did was we analysed over 300 CEOs of professional membership bodies and trade associations, and we looked at their social media impact on Twitter and LinkedIn, and we looked at their level of engagement, looked at their followers. So I had all of the data. Analytica did all of the number crunching, and Synergy did all the printing and the design of it. So what I did then is I then sent that, we mailed that to 100 CEOs. of those membership bodies. So in a way, we all benefit from that co-collaboration piece of research, but it makes us all look like thought leaders in our own space because it was relevant content specifically to that target audience. So that's just one example, but there will be others. I don't know if anybody else has got any other perspectives on B2B influencer marketing. Sahil, have you
Yeah.
done? Sorry,
Yeah,
Jeanette, go on.
yes, sure. You know, the thing though is that in the B2B sphere, people don't like to call themselves influencers.
Correct.
Because of the negative connotation that the term has. So there's, you know, that going on the side. They like to consider themselves thought leaders, and there doesn't always have to be like a financial exchange, right? So with thought leaders of sorts, there can be other exchanges. For example, those people are always keen to get their hand on data first in an exclusive way that they can use because they're creating content themselves, or they are invited to an event, or they are keynote speaker, or have a podium discussion, or all kinds of things, or they are co-creators with articles of the particular brand. Then it becomes in the B2B space, how do you activate your employees to share company news when they become some of an expert or a thought leader themselves, because they're the very people that work within your organization. So don't underestimate that, right? So that can be engaging in other people's posts, but also any company content that is being created. How do you enable employees to use that content so it doesn't just look like copy and paste? It's giving them the freedom within the framework to use it within their own voice. And I may be able to share this. I've done almost like a triage thing with one topic that is a corporate topic, and then how you can trickle this down in different kinds of bits and pieces for thought leaders outside the company, for employees inside the companies, use it on social media for infographics, studies, etc., Q&A. So you can use one piece of content in multiple ways, which is being published by various layers of thought leaders / influencers. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it really does. And you raise a really interesting point, because when we've been talking about influencers, perhaps earlier on, we've talked about sort of social media, then B2B. We've now brought in sort of employee advocates. And I think this is a fantastic area, and perhaps Maria has got a view on this as well, because we've IBM, for example, most of you know, of course, who IBM giants that they are. They embraced on an employee advocacy program. In fact, they call them IBMers. And you're never going to get all of a corporate employees to be influencers or advocates. Not everybody wants to share company content on their own social media feeds, but you'd be amazed how many people would. And even if that's 20%, you think about that, 20% sharing the voice of the company in their own authentic way, how powerful that is. I don't know if any of you have ever seen like we're hiring, a message on LinkedIn or something like we're hiring, or Facebook, and it comes from a junior member of staff, or it doesn't come from the corporate head office or HR. I love that. That speaks volumes to me. I'm much more engaged with that brand if I see that. Maria, I'd love to get your perspective, because Maria talks about servant leadership in a way that really is quite amazing. And I wondered what your thoughts were on sort of employee and the power that they can bring to a brand.
Yeah, no, thanks, Gordon. It's everything that Janet and Charles came up with the B2B question, and that made a lot of sense, because it's all about the power of bottom up, but you've got to create a culture that actually allows that, and that culture, fortunately, unfortunately, it's both ways. it's still created very often, more often than not, in terms of my experience, what I've seen so far globally, it's still top down. But what if we turn the pyramid upside down? And that's what I preach. I talk about turning the pyramid upside down and leveraging when the pyramid has to be up. And it's really, having the two forces working together. And servant leadership is all about that, right? It's really putting others before self and developing others and empowering others to grow. But a servant leader can only be a servant leader when they're really secure about who they are. So you need to, it's kind of like know thyself before you offer your service to others. Because otherwise everything is going to be either you're creating little kingdoms, working in silos, it's all about protection. And, and I love what Janet was saying. She's absolutely right. In the technical space, these people are definitely influencers, but they like to be called thought leaders or experts or some kind of advisors, something like that. But it's usually what Janet says it's thought leaders. So there's a shift of communication with this lot, also because they're focusing on a different, it's a different group of people. They're focusing on B2B. Eventually it will get to B2C, but it's through B2B relationship that it gets to C, if it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, thank
Absolute.
you. Thank you, Maria. Sahil, it'd be interesting to get your perspective on, you're an author with quite a sizable following. You probably don't call yourself an influencer, do you? But you would like to call yourself as a thought leader and a specialist in your niche. What do you like when you're working with brands and partners? What floats your boat?
So it's really an alignment of core values. And I think that a lot of people have mentioned this. It's the authenticity part. I mean, if Marlboro came to me, for example, it just wouldn't work, right? It would be so fake. I would feel disgusted about it myself, and it would be a lie. Whereas if something came, in line with sustainable living and bettering, and taking more care of Mother Earth and being more respectful of people and mental wellness, yes, by all means, that would be more aligned and authentic. But I'm at a very early stage. Like I've only been approached by one brand so far, which makes tea. But they certainly fit the profile because the way they process the tea, how they paid the wages for their employees, it was done in tea bags that were made of potato starch as opposed to plastic, and even the packaging was all biodegradable. So it fit the profile, and we're just in talks now, but I'm still quite new. In fact, when I came on this call, I was thinking more about how do I align myself with other influencers to kind of spread the word, because for me it's not about the money, because I don't depend on this for my personal income. I have my own business, but it's about passing on the message. It's about more people understanding the framework that I've developed and how it can benefit them. Because if you remove the clutter within, there's more inner peace. And I always tell people there's no price you can put on inner peace. So
True.
I came on for twofold. One was how can I collaborate with the other influencers, and the other one is and I liked it because when Jeanette mentioned thought lead, I'm like, yes, I'm one too. But before that, I wasn't thinking of myself as an influencer at all. So I guess the word or the perception can make a difference as well.
No, absolutely. And you just might like to have a look at Analytica and also Thinkers 360. So these are global platforms that specialize in B2B influencers. So these are ones that I've been entrenched with for some time. And if anybody wants an introduction there, then happy to do so. Good. Some really interesting perspectives there. Who haven't we heard from? Tamsin, what's your view on what you've heard? Any sort of thoughts, comments, questions?
Thanks. I found it all very interesting. I'm very new to this area. We haven't yet done any of this type of marketing, which is why I joined the call to learn from the rest of you. So it's been extremely helpful for that. And Charles's question was spot on for me as well, because we're a B2B business. So I was looking at this and thinking, how does this fit in? Because the standard influencers you see on Instagram are not going to be reaching out to our market. It's not going to match. But the sort of thing we're thinking about at the moment with I agree with all the stuff about the authenticity. I would want people passing on our message because they themselves really believe in it. And so in the first case, the place we're looking for influencers is actually in our own customers, our authors on our platform, who we already see sometimes tweeting about liking the platform and sharing content. So it's actually them that we want to reach out to and say, you know, since you've already liked it and you're doing this, can we work more closely with you? So that's the type of thing we're doing. I'm not sure that we're necessary. What I need to do is think about what I've learned on this call and see if we can be rehoning that and doing it better.
Yeah, no, great, Tamsin. Good to hear from you. Nigel, in the world of promotional products, which again is from my old industry, what's your thoughts about what you've heard about, you know, many of the franchises that you represent? How do you see influencer marketing having an impact in your organization?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, Gordon. Secondly, it's been fascinating listening to experts. I'm a complete virgin in this field, which at my age is pretty damn good going, to be honest. But it's very interesting because obviously I run business to business franchises. So like Tamsin, like Charles, looking at something that kind of might add something of value. You know, I mean, I've been doing franchising for 27, 28 years. So I'm a passionate believer in franchising, a passionate believer that franchising can help to generate businesses and help to regenerate local economies and so on and so forth. And I could go on that for hours, but I won't. I think there's a lot that we can all learn from the idea of influencers, but it does take me back a little bit because obviously at my age I am a dinosaur, Gordon.
Look, I'm 56. I mean, so there's not much in it between us.
You're just a kid, Gordon. You're just a kid. Listen, mate. But I do remember in the old days, of course. I mean, as you will do, that we used to bang into our marketing people and our franchises and so forth. Get testimonials, get testimonials, get testimonials. And it comes back to, I think, to what Tamsin was saying. Let's start with the people who actually do buy our product. Let's start with the people who are actually connected with what we do, and get them to do testimonials, which in fact is what influencing, as I can see it, is all about in my very simple way of looking at it. But I'm fascinated, and I've written down a number of questions as to, from my own personal point of view, as to how we might influence. I'll give you an example. For instance, we're looking to become much more, I don't know what the word is, green, carbon neutral, so on, all that sort of stuff, in the area of print. One of the franchises I run is one of the biggest print franchises in the country. We've done a huge amount to get to that. Dare we say net zero? Because I'm not quite sure what the phrase really means when politicians get a hold of it, but you all know what I mean. But I'm not sure we've ever got the message out enough, and I'm not sure we've even influenced our own people enough. So is that an angle to work on? You know, I have a company that goes in and cleans office equipment, IT equipment. You know, so they go in and clean things like keyboards and laptops and all that sort of stuff, and make them safe. So coronavirus safe and all that sort of stuff. So again, that's a benefit. I'm not sure we've ever really developed the whole influencer market enough. Well, I know we haven't. And I'm thinking maybe there's something we can do in there. There's a load of questions, but I'm just delighted you invited me on. I'm delighted with the intellect that's poured forth, and I shall be like a sponge today.
I only
Thank
associate
you.
myself with good people, Nigel. You know that. I mean, that's why
Yeah, well,
all of you are here. But it is also about, particularly when you're in a competitive environment. I mean, we're in the attention economy now, aren't we? That's the biggest challenge. How do we put ourselves above the parapet? And we do so, in my opinion, by being authentic storytellers. If you look at video content, it's shared more now than almost any other. It's going on live. It's bringing people together to allow people to communicate in an engaging manner. Why do people buy? I mean, you talk about print. Actually, I don't know if you can see, but I've just started to get my own clothing. Can you see that? I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that now? I've got my own GG brand there on a clothing. So sometimes it's about being true to yourself as well, and showing up consistently. It's not enough to say, oh, I remember somebody said to me when we were running Promotional Products Week, I've done my bit, I've done a tweet, as though the whole needle was going to move because they've done a tweet. It's not the case. It's about being consistent on a core message. So if you look at your Instagram, you look at your LinkedIn, making sure that they're all saying the same thing. What value are you adding? Are you entertaining? Are you educational? And are you inspirational? Those are the three things which content should be doing all of the time. Not promoting, not look at me, not look at aren't we wonderful, but are you educating, are you inspiring, and are you entertaining in some shape or form? You don't have to be all three of them at the same time. Anyway, we have finished, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry we've come to an end. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you, all of you, for your contributions. I'm sorry if I haven't got everybody hasn't had the chance to speak. I will be putting this video in the Facebook group afterwards. And obviously, if you want to connect with me afterwards and have one-to-one or whatever, be happy to do so. But thanks so much. Nothing again next week because I am on holiday. This is the first time I've had a holiday this year. So I'm going to sunny Madeira, and then but after that, on the 8th Wednesday morning, and then every other Wednesday morning after that, you're all very welcome. So have a lovely day, all of you.
Thank you.
Have a great holiday, Gordon.
All right.
Cheers. Have a good holiday.
Cheers.
Enjoy.
Joni, you're going to stay on the call, aren't you?
Oh, yes, sure, Gordon.
Thanks, Jeanette.
Yeah.
Thanks, Annette. Jim, do you want to stay as well? Oh, she's there as well. I can't see you, Joni. Oh, actually, let's just stop.